Hello, dear friends. I report news as I find them, and I try to give credit to the articles by their author, but I am not responsible for the opinions of others. Rumors are difficult to confirm, because they are personal opinions which responsibility lies with the person who issued them. This information is provided for educational or entertainment purposes. I encourage you to do your own research. Opinion piece. Global Systemic Pact. Possible deal this summer. Predicting systemic collapse. Critical moment for economy. The dark side is losing control. 6 cardinals aspire to become pope. Let's start. A new global financial system has been agreed upon, according to comments made by various officials at the IMF and World Bank meetings in Washington last week, according to Benjamin Fulford. A global systemic pact is a global agreement that defines fundamental rules for the functioning of the international system in key areas. It involves the participation of most of the world's countries, the creation of rules or norms that structure the behavior of states and other international actors, and an impact on the overall functioning of the international system. Alternative sources interpret these changes as a sign that the global financial elite is losing control of the system, and that a transition is imminent, and even suggest the possibility of truth and reconciliation processes or war crimes trials. The debate over forgive and forget versus war crimes trials evokes historical references such as the Nuremberg trials, which set precedents in international justice for war crimes and crimes against humanity. At the recent IMF and World Bank meetings in Washington, senior international officials acknowledged that the global economy is going through a critical period, and that it's essential to advance agreements and cooperation to ensure financial stability and foster technological innovation. This refers to a framework of globally agreed upon norms, principles or policies that regulate fundamental aspects of the functioning of the international system, such as economics, politics and security. Russian Finance Minister Anton Silvanov stressed the need to restore international cooperation and promote innovation as key to the future of the global economy, which coincides with the perception that the new international financial system is emerging. Consensus. The consensus reached at the IMF and World Bank meetings points to a phase of reforms and strengthened cooperation in the global financial system, with an emphasis on regulation, innovation, and economic resilience. Trade tensions between the US and China remain a source of uncertainty, although there are signs of openness to negotiation. The actual process is gradual and depends on multilateral agreements, institutional reforms, and evolving relations between the major economic powers. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has criticized the current performance of the IMF and the World Bank, while acknowledging their central role in the international system. Bessent called for key reforms to ensure that the Bretton Woods institutions serve their stakeholders, not the other way around. In response to China's influence and its Belt and Road initiative, he also encouraged trade aligned with security, suggesting that US security alliances should influence economic alignment. The trade war with China, marked by reciprocal tariffs, has been described as unsustainable by Bessent, who foresees a possible de-escalation in the coming months. China, for its part, has signaled a greater willingness to negotiate, although it maintains a firm stance and will not budge without significant concessions from Washington. Negotiations. High-level meetings between Chinese elders representing the Dragon family and the people behind Trump are expected to reach some kind of agreement by the summer. The question we face now is whether we are willing to forgive and forget crimes through a process of truth and reconciliation, or whether we want summary trials. Whatever the case, the dark side has lost control of the financial system, and its days in power are coming to an end. The goal is to develop practical tools for supervising bank liquidity risk and improving the resilience of the non-bank financial sector, as well as finalize the implementation of Basel III standards and review the effectiveness of post-global financial crisis regulation, although there are delays and uncertainty in the US and the UK. It's also about reforming the structures. The IMF and World Bank decision-making frameworks are designed to give a greater voice to the countries and communities most affected by the financial crisis, as well as to improve consumer protection and financial innovation, with a particular focus on preventing money laundering and combating terrorist financing and facilitating financing for excluded groups such as indigenous peoples, women and local communities. Opinions. According to Doug Casey, most of the world's banks are on the brink of collapse. According to Mr. Ed, the monetary system was created by darkness to control and oppress humankind. Originally, humans freely exchanged goods, but were later subjected to a system where money was necessary for survival, which only served to enslave and restrict people. In his view, the financial system is described as a tool to maintain power among a privileged few, who, it is said, follow the orders of darkness and act against the interest of the general population. He presents the system as inherently corrupt, leading to crime, suffering, and the suppression of human progress. He predicts that the current financial system, based on greed and suffering, is destined to collapse. Mr. Ed dismisses attempts to transition to digital currency as futile, arguing that higher dimensional realities do not require money. Mr. Ed emphasizes that humans are beings of light and that every cell emits biophotons. He encourages people to recognize their origin and the star seeds as their multidimensional nature, suggesting that true progress and happiness come from expanding consciousness and releasing limiting beliefs. He also claims that personal and planetary transformation would be possible through focused intention and the spiritual awakening. China. The Chinese Politburo also hinted at the end to the Babylonian-style slavery of central bank debt when it said that new structural monetary policy instruments and policy-based financial instruments will be established to encourage technological innovation, expand consumption, and maintain stable foreign trade, in quotes. In a sign that the deal with China would be reached, Guo Jiakun, Chinese foreign minister spokesman, declared, Our doors are open. This came after Trump claimed to have a good relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping, promised a substantial reduction in tariffs on Chinese imports, and emphasized that he is not seeking to play hardball with China. Trump's birthday is June 14th, and Xi Jinping's is the following day, so discussions are likely to take place then. Meanwhile, both sides are playing hardball. In particular, there is a lot of intense espionage and special forces activity focused on rare earth metals. Rare earths. Since 2010, military demand for components containing 5 critical minerals, antimony, gallium, germanium, tungsten, and tellurium, has soared. China wants companies in Korea, Myanmar, and elsewhere that they could face sanctions if they violate export restrictions on rare earth minerals. The problem isn't finding rare earths, but establishing the infrastructure to process them. It could take up to 5 years to develop a supply chain that replaces China's global monopoly on processing rare earths into materials needed to produce everything from iPhones to F-35 fighter jets. However, it appears that Trump has secured a significant new supply of gold and copper in Bougainville. The deposit is estimated to contain nearly 6 million tons of copper and nearly 20 million ounces of gold, with a current value of about $60 billion. Even with this mine, Trump wouldn't have enough gold to pay off the debt. Trade war. However, while China has the advantage in rare earths and gold, it also has its own problems. First, they have just realized that they cannot sell their treasury bonds because if they did, the value of the renminbi would skyrocket and Chinese exports would become uncompetitive. The other thing is that the US has China under its thumb, as the trade war threatens to close Chinese plastic factories, which depend on imports of ethane. The US economy is facing a significant decline in exports due to tariffs imposed during the trade war. The lack of alternative ethane suppliers and existing long-term contracts make it difficult for Chinese factories to find alternative solutions, leading to financial losses. Economic indicators suggest a possible slowdown in China's GDP growth, which would further exacerbate the challenges facing the plastics industry and the economy in general. Unless an agreement is reached between China and the US, many people will not receive their plastic toys. Japan. Chinese tourists are cancelling their trips to Japan due to rumors of a major disaster on July 5th. The prediction is for some kind of massive earthquake and tsunami this summer. In another source of tension, an intense proxy war against Maoism is breaking out in East Asia. China is persecuting sects such as the Unification Church or Munis, the Science of Happiness, Soka Gakkai, and Falun Gong. The Munis were created by remarks of Japanese imperial intelligence after World War II. The Japanese government has withdrawn their tax-exempt religious status and, for the first time, declared mind control a crime. Pakistan and India. The other major Asian problem is the threat of nuclear war between Pakistan and India. The militaries of both countries have fired at each other following a terrorist attack. A Pakistani minister is threatening to attack India with nuclear weapons, and China has warned it will fight to protect Pakistan from an Indian invasion. Hopefully, both sides will realize that this is simply another attempt by the dark side to trigger a long-planned Armageddon. Ukraine. Russia confirms that the peace agreement in Ukraine cannot be reached until Zelensky leaves and the Nazis in his regime face war crimes trials. This is why high-level talks in London failed. Trump himself says Ukraine should accept Russia's offer. Former CIA officer Larry Johnson and retired General Wesley Clark predict that the Russian military will occupy both Kiev and Odessa. Russia claims it doesn't want to control non-Russian areas of Ukraine. Europe. In St. Peter's Basilica, before Pope Francis' farewell, Macron and Starmer were told to stay away from the Trump-Zelensky talks. Trump also humiliated Macron by refusing to shake his hand. In another sign that Macron's regime in France is coming to an end, French Prime Minister François Bayrou has become embroiled in a scandal involving violence and sexual abuse allegedly committed at the Catholic school in his home region of the Pyrenees. Meanwhile, senior European officials are denouncing Ursula von der Leyen's toxicity and calling for her resignation, according to the Swiss magazine Die Belle Voce. Her retirement could unlock many things, the magazine says. Middle East. The latest domino to fall is rumored to be Netanyahu. Trump is distancing himself from him to avoid being drawn into a war with Iran, while he attempts to negotiate with the Persian regime. As evidence of this, the US and Iranian delegations attended the Pope's funeral together, while Netanyahu was not invited. Iran's largest port is now a ghost town after a massive explosion. Iranian government sources claim it was caused by a shipment of ammonium nitrate in transit to Uzbekistan, but they also suspect Israel. Meanwhile, Iran is building a $3.4 billion barrier on its border with Afghanistan. Its goal is to combat drug and arms trafficking, human trafficking, and illegal immigration, prevent border clashes, and ensure the movement of people and goods between the two countries. The latest Trump's challenge in the West is to reach an agreement with Canada. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney could offer a friendly deal. As soon as the West agrees, the difficult part begins, negotiating a new agreement with China and Asia. Vatican. The Vatican has activated an ambitious surveillance and cybersecurity system to prevent leaks during the conclave that will decide Pope Francis' successor. The next Pope. Although the process is confidential and there is no clear favorite, several cardinals stand out as possible successors. Some of them are: first, Pietro Parolin, Italy, Vatican Secretary of State, considered a moderate with extensive diplomatic experience, including negotiations with China. Second, Luis Antonio Tagle, Philippines, former Archbishop of Manila and current prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples. Third, Matteo Zuppi, Italy, Archbishop of Bologna, known for his pastoral approach focused on social justice and his peace efforts in Ukraine. Fourth, Peter Turkson, Ghana, recognized for his activism in social justice and sustainable development. Fifth, Peter Erdo, Hungary, conservative theologian with a strong ecumenical profile, representing a possible inclination toward more traditional positions. 6. Robert Sora, Guinea, former prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship. He is a leading figure among the more conservative sectors of the Church. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.